Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here, Chris. I'm not sure what you've told everyone about what I do and potentially why you've asked me to do this.
No, I've not given them any information. I'll let you I'll let you introduce yourself and the team.
Great, fantastic. Hi guys, hello. Nice to meet all of you, wherever you are in the world. Welcome. I am in London right now. I'm actually at the Reality Centre in East London in Shoreditch. I work for VR Focus. Some of you guys might read it regularly or potentially know of it. We basically do the news. We talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, anything related to VR essentially. And I have a background in filmmaking, and I kind of did a bit of sort of a commentary on gaming as well. And it kind of led me down the route into doing a little bit of stuff for Women in VR or Unfold, which used to be a woman monthly meetup in London where people would come together and everyone would talk about their ideas and their projects, and it was all about being open. And then Kevin, our CEO and editor, came to me and I was working part-time for VR Focus. He said, I want to set up the VR Diversity Initiative. I want to help the future of virtual reality, and I don't want it to be like gaming. And coming from sort of a film background, I very much said the same thing. I said, I 100% agree with you. What can we do about it? So last year with Catherine Allen at Digital Catapult, and had the VR Diversity Initiative, which was extremely successful to the extent that we decided, okay, let's do it again this year. We're going to be doing it every 2 months. And so far, that's basically what we've been doing. So I was just going to do a yay quick introduction of everyone here, who you are, what you do, and then I did send you a little email, but it would be great if you could give everyone an example of potentially some type of personal experience you've had where you might have experienced some type of discrimination or an area where you think VR could be better. Alan, do you want to go? Oh,
my audio's in and out a little bit. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, so I heard Nina's introduction. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. And just wanted to introduce myself to people. My name's Caitlin Krause. I have a company called MindWise. And MindWise really looks at focused connection. So bringing people back to humanity through connection, looking into VR experiences, AR, as a possible tool and medium to connect people both inside with themselves and outside with any sort of audience, community. Education is really important to me. So the 3 areas that I primarily work in involve mindfulness, storytelling, and design. And I was an educator for over 10 years. I was also in computer programming, and every experience I've had with learning has really taught me that at the core of the kind of situation where we're learning and taking in information involves first a sense of belonging and a sense that you are included and you're welcome and your voice is honored. So this diversity in VR initiative that Nina was talking about is really important to me too and close to my heart. I recently spoke at the World VR Forum and gave a talk about mindfulness in VR and looking at what it means to be mindful. I'm always questioning where I am and what my purpose is being there. So today on this panel, I can certainly speak to that, speak to what mindfulness is at the brief introduction, but I also want to add that I've been living internationally. And as I travel from place to place and work in different countries and live there and assimilate different customs, I'm thinking about that balance between being true to yourself and true to your own identity and also belonging in the culture that you're in. So when you grow up internationally, there's a phrase for that called third culture kid, where you always kind of keep your own customs, but you're also adopting some of the new customs of the space around you. And I think it offers a lot of profound opportunities to think about in VR as we cultivate spaces that both encourage belonging and also celebrate diversity and differences. Yeah, so that's my brief introduction, and then we can dive more deeply into topics. Yeah.
Dina, do you want to have a little introduction? Oh.
Can you hear me? Am I
hear.
breaking up?
There you go.
I don't know if anybody else can hear me. It's slightly in and out, the audio, same as you're finding, I think. And so I have multiple different roles. I'm here mainly because I run an MA in immersive factual storytelling at UCL, which is we're just coming to the end of the first year of that course, which has been a really interesting experience. I'm also one of the producers in the BBC VR Hub, which is where I'm actually sitting in real life at the moment. So they're all listening in on what I'm saying, which is kind of amusing. And I also have a company where I make experiences for museums and installations, a lot focused around audio, but starting to be more and more involved in VR for those outlets as well. So, and I have to say, I have not experienced any discrimination in this industry. It's really that, but it's definitely the case that, you know, my colleagues at the BBC are working really, really hard to make sure that we have got a female presence and a diverse kind of team to make sure that from the beginning, from the get-go, you know, that's kind of something that we're really, really aware of and really making sure that we're covering off. So that's been a really nice experience. And in fact, some of the things we've been doing in BBC lately have had all women teams, including a piece we've just made about subjects, which is really fab. That's all good. That's all the good news. That's a brief intro for me.
I have a question jumping in. I don't know if I can follow up on that, but I'm curious because I feel similar to, is it Dinah or Dina? Sorry, I want to be sure.
But I'll answer to anything.
Okay. Well, Dinah, when you were speaking about diversity, I'm curious because I haven't heard, well, for me, it's interesting to consider all the multiplicities of measures. How does diversity get measured in terms of knowing that you're giving attention to it and, you know, that is inclusive? What sort of metrics, I mean, do you have to measure it?
In this particular project, in this BBC context, we are not using any metrics. Okay. It's really that I've got a very kind of aware editor who has made a real point of making sure that looking beyond necessarily the obvious candidate and going for making sure that we're, you know, completing the picture in terms of what we think diversity is. And that's been great.
Yeah.
That's been really helpful.
Great. Kind of goes beyond formulas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to start off with, I don't want this to be like every other panel about diversity. There have been so many different panels discussing the importance of diversity. I kind of don't want to regurgitate about everything that's already been said there. So I would like to focus on potentially about what's being done right now and what we together can do in the future, if that's okay with everyone here. So one of the things that I would like to discuss is that VR is a very new medium, and you know, there's a lot of people who argue saying, if the medium of VR is so new, why is diversity important now? And I think we can all agree that to avoid things that happened in video gaming and in film and in media right now, that focusing on it from the very get-go, from the very beginning, already, you know, equalizes everything. So what we focus on at the VR Diversity Initiative is we are trying to bring in underrepresented groups of individuals. We try to give them the confidence to go and learn Unity skills, programming skills, get a 360 camera, go out there and really go there. So we only take in people from underrepresented groups. So we won't take someone who kind of comes from a wealthy background and, you know, has access to VR. We're really trying to focus on people who would not be able to have access to that. And I think that's really important And it's really great to see that the BBC and other areas of the media, especially with the whole Me Too movement, are recognizing that there are other stories to be told. Bearing this in mind, or is sort of talking about VR in general, when engineers, there are past examples, speaking to Alicia and Alex, who've been helping out with the VR diversity initiative. Alicia works for Blend Media, so they do a lot of 360 film, and she works together with Alex Rue, and they do lots of 360 making, run a Facebook community. And when they asked, or did a poll and asked the community, how do we make 360 film more friendly to female, creatives out there? People were angry. They said maybe you should make a pink 360 film camera, which is absolutely crazy. The same happened with Magic Leap. Engineers were asked to make their headsets more female friendly. I'm not quite sure what that means, but for them, they also said the same thing. They thought, why don't we make a pink headset? And these are kind of ideas that I think persist from maybe the 80s, the idea of toys, the idea of Barbies and Action Man. How can we change this perspective in the younger engineers and developers out there, especially the leaders within this field? I'd like to hear your opinion. Go on.
Well, there's a phrase that came to mind called "pink it and shrink it." Have you ever heard that? Like,
No,
you just take the standard expected object and pink on it and shrink it down, and that feminizes it in the perspective, in this idea. Have you heard that before at all?
No, but that makes me really sad.
It is. It makes me exceptionally sad, and I'm thinking, in a way, if we could wash the clean of all expectations, like all preconceived biases and notions, I think the first step is just to really be open with ourselves. I go back to mindfulness. For me, I used to say aware, advancing, and authentic. And if you're really aware of yourself, then you have to acknowledge, okay, there's certain expectations that have been conditioned, maybe through the stories that we carry or through the stories that we were told about ourselves at some point. Everybody has a connection, and I think everybody's invited to the conversation. And that's why, Nina, with diversity initiatives, it's important to me to first start with that, just saying you are welcome at the table to be part of this conversation. But part of the recreation from the beginning in VR, I think, is telling stories for every user to experience in a first-person, intimate perspective that honors who they are and doesn't pink it or shrink it or do anything to it to try to give an impression that you're modifying what is the standard. Because in a sense, we get to recreate the standard. And I know there's a chapter of this in Peter Rubin's book called Virtual Presence, Future Presence, sorry. And it's really great because he talks about how this capacity right now that we have in VR is to create something new and different that's not modifying something. And I think some of the stigma is that people might hear diversity and think, oh, it's something that's almost like a checkbox. I have to pay attention to that and say that I've honored it and checked it off. When actually it's honoring human dignity, like saying first, sort of like at the UN, how they have, this universal human rights declaration. What if we have a universal VR human rights declaration where we just say from the beginning, everybody's honored, and that means that we need to think about different sizes, shapes, backgrounds, languages, cultures. I mean, from the beginning, that should be something that's part of the intention of building a human experience. So I guess I get really passionate about this because that's what I think is core to the underlying intention when you build stories in VR.
I think this is really interesting because my job really is to travel the world, and a lot of what I experience is video games. And some of the experiences that I try have to, you put trackers out. That's my desk. You put trackers onto your feet, on your body, and if there's a mirror of some kind, the first thing that I see usually is the option. Really isn't an option to be a woman or different shapes and sizes. And when you talk to the developers, you know, it's not even on their mind. They don't even think about it. It's something that's so far out of their, you know, capacity. And when we talk about different sizes, I did an article about out of home VR entertainment. And this is an area where VR is growing quite a lot, and there's a lot of money coming in this area. And I notice this when I do this with my colleague, who is slightly of a bigger stature than I am. I'm a little bit smaller, and you can see people freaking out the moment we arrive, because we're so different in size, in body, in shape, in heights, that, you know, this is something that I think from the get-go, if you are a developer out there or an engineer, if you're designing something, you have to think about this. A lot of the time, this is kind of left at the last minute, and it becomes a little bit embarrassing when it comes to the end user, I feel.
Just quickly jump in there, just so you're aware. Dinah, sorry, I've been muting you while the others have been talking, just because the people in the back of the room there were making,
Oh, it's too
obviously there's people
noisy.
in your room
Shall I tell
making a
them to
bit of
shut up?
noise. If you could.
Okay, guys, you need to be better because you're disrupting. Sorry, let's put them in their place. There's a lot of females in this room. So no, I was going to say, I think that's a really interesting point. I think what you were saying about the stories is a real opportunity in VR, because I think actually if we start from the beginning of a really sort of diverse, truly reflective set of stories that we want to tell in VR, that feels to me the way to engage people, and all different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, ages. Ages is often one that's kind of forgotten in this kind of picture. And I think that's what VR can do really well. And that's why it's really exciting to be in it at this stage, and to be able to make sure that we are reflecting that full diversity of stories. And that will bring, I hope, bring the diversity that we're looking for in terms of the makers as well.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
One thing that I wanted to ask both of you, you come from sort of a programming background, doing some research on generally trying to get more people to be hired. That is the aim of the VR Diversity Initiative. We want to say, please hire, you know, these people from underrepresented backgrounds, because they could enable to show different stories, different voices, different perspectives, and that's kind of what we want at the end of the day. What we're seeing is that a lot of girls don't really go into STEM courses or anything having to do with science or mathematics, and how that's kind of the problem that we're facing when there are companies that come to the initiative. They say, well, do any of your participants have any coding skills? And I have to be honest, most of the people who come to the initiative come from a creative background. Then they come from a tech background, and then they come from a business background. But most of the people who are coming in are coming from completely different sources. They're sculptors, they're story writers, they're artists, they're dancers, they're singers, and they're looking at the medium and they're thinking, you know, what can we do with it? How can we tell a new story? And then the biggest problem that we're facing is we can't get them a job, or we can't figure out how to give them money, because no one wants to invest in that area right now. They're investing in, I don't know, applications for design, for engineering, for architecture. How do we keep this community safe when they're, you know, when it's so expensive, when it's still so new?
Can I jump in on that one? Because I think that's a really interesting area. And I think that one of the difficulties we're facing at the moment is and the content have to go hand in hand. Even if you're more of a content person, less of a tech person, you still have to somehow have some basic awareness of the tech, because we're so dependent on the tech in this space, and the way it's as creators. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I don't know if anyone else has come across this, but at UCL, they're doing a new MA, which is, they're calling it MASH, which is an MASC, which is basically a thing for creative technologists. So people who have an interest or some kind of expertise, maybe in technology, also maybe have an expertise or an interest in the arts, and trying to bring these two things together, because they're getting a real demand from all different times of industry beyond VR to have that partnership, those two expertise, those two skills converge together going forward. And I think that's where we should be heading, because actually I feel like that sort of separation between the arts and the technology is becoming less necessary. I don't know if anyone else thinks, but it feels to me that to try and bring those two things together and build together on both of those skills and create people who have a bit of one maybe, but a lot of the other, or equal of both, is a way forward in terms of giving the weight to those creatives that you're talking about, Nina. I don't know what you think. Is a mesh
Well,
something that would be of interest?
Mm.
Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
I agree. I'm interested in it completely, and I think that um, the danger is that we think we're talking about watering down skill sets, but I think, in the future, when Nina mentions these storytelling skills, the creative, the design, they say in the future with the rise in AI that those are the skills that will be necessary. And I'm thinking it's not exclusive. Like, for me, I'm looking at examples like what's happening in Boston College, where they have a course that Joan Nugent teaches that's all about Ulysses, but he takes the text of Ulysses and couples the literature students with the computer programmers and then builds in a VR experience called Joystick. It's a little punny, but Joystick is meant to have cross-pollination of skill sets so that I think the key here is for these students to keep all of their storytelling drive and their creative initiative, but also to understand the language of what's happening behind the screen, like what's happening a little bit with the coding. Then they can go into the area that they're an expert at, develop those skills, but be multifaceted so that they're speaking a common language. I know for me, understanding how code works makes me more able to be creative, but I'm not the expert who's building all the code so that I can rely on my team. And another thing that I did want to add is that in education, we're always talking about models now that don't just replace what's happening in the real world, but actually transform the experience. So I'm thinking about with a SAMR model in mind, what can education and what can creativity do in VR that it can't do in real life, so that it's actually transforming an experience as well. And I think that for this team of creatives, that's going to drive the future, because then you're creating a market that doesn't exist elsewhere.
No, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you mentioned AI and the fact of the future, and how in the future creative jobs is really where I think these skills will be necessary. And I'm so glad that at your university, Dinah, that they're looking into this, because I see this huge gap of, I suppose, my generation, older generation, who don't know about coding and programming, now trying to catch up with it. And I think it's really fantastic if you guys are teachers or educators out there, or even parents. I really encourage you to look at trying to find ways to jealous of it. I want to be the one taking part in it, learning Unity and the skills. And I'm almost saying, I can't do it. I'm organizing it for you guys, but it's really about giving them the confidence to go out and learn the skills themselves. We want to say, here's a little taster. VR is really expensive. You guys might not have all of the technology available, or potentially the workshop leaders there, the teachers to teach and train you. But what we can do is give you a little boost of confidence to say, yes, you can do it by yourself. If you have a VR ready, laptop, PC accessible somewhere, it is possible for you to learn. And we have had a few success stories. We've had, now from last year, we've had a girl who decided, she was on the sort of the wall of like, should I do this? Should I not do this? She said, okay, that's it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to set up an augmented reality company. And now she's doing that. She's gone off and set up her own company. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking this, and the feedback that we're getting from the people participating is, it's so much more easier than I thought it was. And the workshop leaders are giving us the same feedback. They're saying, why I need help. All of the information is online, but sometimes you just need, I think, that little extra push of courage to really, go forward and do it yourselves. And I think in the future it would be fantastic if, in a weird way, you could learn how to create VR in VR. Chris, is that an idea for future?
Yeah, that would be really
future
cool. I
things.
think that's, and I don't think we're that far off that. I think we're nearly there. But I was just going to go back to what you said before, Nina, about you've got this pool of really talented artists and they're not finding an outlet. And I think for now, anyway, and that's certainly the way I've been running things in my courses. It's about collaboration, isn't it? It's about pulling together those fantastic creatives with those who are able in some of the other areas of expertise. We'll just help them to carry on doing this without necessarily having to stop what they're doing and kind of divert off and learn some coding, or to try and bring together some of these unbelievably creative people with those who've got those expert skills is a really fab opportunity, I think.
Definitely, for sure.
Makes me
And
think
I
we could build special community with us.
yeah,
People working in VR, and also ways to jump into the diversity initiative, but also to storytell success stories, and I don't know, maybe even offer yourself, saying I have these interests and these expertises, and I want to join projects so that people can come together.
Well, so that's funny that you say that, because this is the area that we're having difficulties in, because virtual reality is so big. You can go into engineering, into art,
Yeah.
into fashion, into all kinds, and because it's so big, it's very difficult for us to say, where do you go from here, because there's so many different skill sets, and how do you measure that? There isn't, I don't know, a special number that you can add, or say you've reached this level of skill for VR and now you can work with them. So what we're definitely looking for is partnerships. If you guys are working in the field and you think you can help participants in this area, and I'm talking to the leaders, talking to people like my boss Kevin, some white middle-class guy. You guys are the ones we're looking for. You guys are in the field, you guys are in the area, we need your help. We can't do this by ourselves. We need your support. And what I definitely see is more role models. We need more role models. I found some very interesting research from Microsoft, who said that if you bring in a role model and you present them to young people, especially young girls, if that role model works in any STEM area, so it doesn't matter if they're a scientist, a mathematician, an engineer, overall those young girls will want to pursue that career a lot more. And I think that whole idea, again, what you mentioned, I can't remember, was it where everything turns pink?
Yep. Shrink it and pink it.
Drink it and
But
pink
anyway,
it.
I'm not.
That idea is just, that needs to be changed. If you want a future for the younger generation, for a more inclusive, fast developing VR, you have to include everyone. And I think, that's definitely the key. What we're finding, especially as well, there were 5 participants who were deaf. And we say that we want to be completely inclusive and have, people with disabilities involved. But at the end of the day, it was very difficult to have, bring someone in who's deaf in virtual reality. How do you do that? And Chris mentioned, there are charities out there where people who with no arms and no hands want to come into VR. How do we help them out? Do we bring in eye tracking? But at the same time, they have so much potential to give you a solution that no one would have ever thought of before, just because of the way they think.
Well, and this is, if I could jump in, this is a part that's so fascinating to me, because if you're studying neuroscience, like I'm working with mindfulness and the human brain, VR is a place of wonder. I think we have this conversation, and underlying the reason that you're all here in the room, I think, is because you love VR and you love this feeling that I call lose yourself to find yourself. I mean, just wave your arms around if you like being in VR and kind of leaving it all outside and coming in here. And I like to just explore that sense of play, that capacity for wonder, and thinking, if we just keep this intention in mind, then we could build experiences in VR that invite diversity and apply it to the sustainable global goals. Take the SDGs and really make some kind of project to work on together. You're in here in this world. I feel like I'm quoting Goonies. This is our place, our world. But you build something here, and I do think that, you know, they're still doing brain research about what's happening in the brain, but creativity flourishes when you don't have all of those maybe biases, obstacles, stress factors. And you know, I would speculate that you could have even more creativity in a VR environment set up for that type of design. So with what Nina was saying, and you know, that this whole idea in mind, I think underneath it all, it's like maybe we can take some projects and really generate some impact globally through inviting these conversations into a VR environment.
I was thinking maybe, you know, we could take an example of what we're doing. So, you know, with the VR Diversity Initiative, there are a lot of participants who who approach me and say, you know, what can I do now? Where do I go from here? And this is the retention problem we're seeing a lot with women, particularly, I think, in some fields, especially in STEM, where they try it out and then the culture of the field doesn't quite fit so well. How do we, you know, keep people involved, keep them interested, and potentially maybe we can do some projects here all together. I don't know where all of you guys are, but maybe, you know, that's there. Maybe Chris, I'm not sure where you are, but we could do a little poll, a little feedback thing, and say maybe we can maybe create a project together of some kind.
There's Chris.
Hey. Yeah, we can do something. We can send out an email or something following this, and see what. Oh, sorry, Dinah, you're Dinah. Your people in the background are waffling again. Yeah, no, we can follow up with stuff. If I'd have thought of that before, actually, I could have prepared a little quiz for you here that we could have pushed out to do a thing. But certainly, that's as we get used to the new build and all the software we can use this for. Then yeah, we can do some stuff like that. But yeah, we'll speak to Steve afterwards and get a follow on for this for you.
So I'm not sure how much time we have left, but I was thinking maybe a Q&A. I'm sure people here have tons of questions for the ladies here. Maybe we can do a little bit of a question answer session here now.
So we'll do as before. If anyone's got a question, if they want to just like wave their hand around, and I'll find you and mute you. Oh, straight in. We've got Lynn. Cool. Lynn's cool.
It'd be really great
Lynn.
as well if you could say where you're from, Lynn, and where you are, just because it's really interesting for me to know where everyone's come from.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm Lynn. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and it's about 2 a.m. in the morning or something
Oh God!
Oh my
wonderful like
gosh!
that.
Wow.
But I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be right now. This is incredibly inspirational for me. I'm a teacher, full-time teacher, and I also work with wonderful people here with development. And I'd like to ask, do you work directly with people like me who are full-time teachers? Because what I'm seeing here is that I can change my mindset from my students have to learn this skill to now my students can tell their story using this. And we've got some beautiful stories. We've got different cultures. We've got different learning skills. We've got kids that want to show in VR how autism really feels like. So do you actually work with teachers like me that could develop these sort of projects? Oh, either one. Yeah, anyone who'd like to answer.
I mean,
Dinah,
I
do you
think
want to go
so.
with that one?
Yeah. I mean, certainly with none of my hats, I'm sad to say, do I work directly with teachers. I think it's a really interesting opportunity and definitely something we want to think more about in the future. There are so many at the moment there are too many obstacles to do a big project that goes into schools. And now I'm talking with my BBC hat on, because of the sort of constraints around kids and VR and accessibility and getting hold of the kit and the cost. It's a problem. I think the message, though, that we want kids to understand that actually there are these tools out there now, there are these opportunities in their careers to use these tools to be much more ambitious, I guess, in terms of telling stories. That's definitely a message that I absolutely personally endorse and certainly do with my sort of university background. I know lots of my colleagues in the BBC would feel that as well. It's just trying to work out how we best inspire that group and how best to kind of inform them that that's out there for them.
I can speak about this too. Agreeing, I think that there's an infrastructure that's building into place for more schools to be able to collaborate, but there are definitely ways on the ground. Like I was actively teaching full time for over 10 years in middle school and high school, and then got into VR. And right now, I like to say we're in this awkward middle phase where the user interfaces are becoming robust and educators are learning. You know, I laugh. Jamie Donnelly is one of friends, and she was on an earlier panel today. Shout outs that we're really looking at, you know, even the basics of, you know, how do you disinfect 30 headsets if you're using them for kids all the time. You know, do you have one user experience? What is the actual story on the ground in the classroom? And maybe in a school, how can the kids be the drivers of the learning so that an educator doesn't feel totally overwhelmed by the medium? I would say to Lynn directly, A, don't give up. B, Twitter and other social media can be your community to kind of onboard some of the things that are happening and initiatives. Like I am at mindwise_CK. So if you want to look up with me, or if anyone wants to on Twitter, I'm part of this hashtag ARVR in EDU community. We all share resources. There are different tools that are starting to use very simple programs that kids can build into stories. Like one is CoSpaces. So they have an EDU platform, and you can start very simple. I think that's the best way, and then build up and see what you're curious about. Let the students kind of add from there, and you know, form fits function. You can make it as big as you want to, but I guarantee you there are enough people out in the world that are equally motivated to use VR in intentional ways in education. Yeah, and you know, I'll follow up. So watch this space, and anyone invited in the room can write to me if you want to have specific education resources and links to other people working with VR in education.
I'd like to add on top of that, if you looked at the Google conferences, there is a course that's going to be opening up this summer where they're giving free VR courses. And I think the only barrier to entry that you would definitely be facing is how many headsets and how expensive will it be to set up. I was filming Chris setting up at Langley. I think it was 12 VR headsets with the Vive, and the kids they loved it. They saw the potential. They were so inspired, but that is an absolute mess to put together with the wires and the headsets. So I just think one small steps at a time, and depending on your budget, maybe have a bigger space, and maybe you can collaborate with other areas or sectors in your school.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right.
Go to set up another one. Did I see some other hands waving earlier? Can't see.
Yes, here.
Who's waving?
Somebody.
Up there. Oh, Andrew. Sorry, Andrew. I did think I saw you waving earlier. And where's Andrew?
Hi.
My gosh, so many of you. I really can't see you. I'm being blind. Come on. Oh, there you are.
In VR.
Sorry, Andrew. There you go. I found you now.
Are there any talk shows that the BBC is doing, Dinah, in VR, highlighting women in VR and in technology? That's one question. The second is VR and talk shows. You know, BBC. Where are they at with that? You know, this is the state of the art with that, because that's how everyone's going to be watching it. So you're muted, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Dinah. People were getting noisy again in the background.
Okay, I think they're all going to go home soon, so it'll be okay. Yeah,
I'll mute myself.
So where we're at the BBC is we have a small project which is to really try and raise awareness of VR, to then test how much interest there is in the audience in VR, because in terms of whether it's yet a mainstream interest, no, it isn't. And so we kind of have this experimental project for a relatively short time to try and raise the bar of quality of content, because I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people maybe don't go into VR, but also then to use that to do proper audience research about what the interest is and how much the audience might like it. So we're not there yet. I think you're right. I think that, you know, if we can kind of make the case and prove that VR has got a really good, strong future, particularly in entertainment. And we know it's got, I mean, I think personally it's got a really strong future in loads of different applications. In entertainment, possibly the jury's still out, maybe. But if we can start to explore more ambitious projects using VR in that way, I think that would be really exciting. And I know that all my colleagues would be saying, we just have to go little steps, I guess. Start off by trying to persuade internally as well as externally that we think VR has got huge potential, which is what we're doing. We're working really hard at that, with a view to them being able to do creative and ambitious stuff.
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have noise here as well. Anyways, I'd be interested. I'm a producer in real life. I just finished 100 films in the educational film field, and I'm ready for next. And I'd love to be a part of a show in VR, highlighting women in VR, highlighting women in tech as an inspiration for other women. So if anyone's putting together something like that, that would be something I'd love to get involved in. And applying my real world skills to, it's not time dated, so it's something I really want to do. And I could do it here on Engage. I could do it on the High Fidelity platform, which I work on a lot. I work a lot on the Sansar platform. I have a TV series, talk show coming out there in the fall. But I'd love to promote women, highlighting women that are an inspiration and that could inspire a lot of women. We need more women in the industry, absolutely. My mentor in the publishing industry was a woman, and she took me under her wing. She was a rock star publisher for 20 years and taught me, you know, things that I'll have the rest of my life. I want to pass that forward.
Whereabouts are you based?
Miami, Florida, but I spend about half my time in San Francisco. I go back and forth, San Francisco, California. I go back and forth. I work all over the planet, so I happen to be in Miami right now.
Not a bad place.
I mean, it might be an interesting. Yeah, I was just thinking it might be an interesting idea, Chris. I don't know how feasible this is because I don't know how much effort goes. I'm sure a lot of effort goes in setting these things up, but almost to have a more regular hangout, maybe in this kind of in the engaged platform of women, and invite more and more of that kind of girls, whatever, whichever age groups, and maybe even some of the oops, I just smashed in the real world something in front of me. Maybe some of the artists and people that you talk about as well, Nina, that we could almost bring together with producers or with people who are interested in making stuff in VR and start to form those relationships and do some stuff.
We can organize a VR meetup, I suppose. That promotes diversity of some kind. Yeah.
And the film of it, the video of it might be where most people see it. They'll see it on YouTube and go, oh, I want to be more a part of this. So obviously YouTube is going to be the largest audience. Streaming, if it's streamed, it's going to be the largest audience, but it'll encourage people to come in. I want to get the Oculus Go when Engage is ready for that. I want to get in there. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool, right. Now let's just have a quick look at the time. It's 10:02. So was there any more questions? We can probably take another one if there was another one. Or waving. No? Okay, so we'll call it but that's perfect timing because that gives everyone a short break then before going into the next session, because we've been going for quite a while now and everyone's been doing fantastically well. So
is that Paola? Yeah.
Yep, I wasn't on mute everyone there.
She could be stretching. She might be stretching.
For a minute. Yep, you're unmuted. Have you got a question?
Am I talking? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We have 10 minutes. Can we all hang out in another room for those 10 minutes, like more one-on-one chat? You guys? Are you okay?
Sure.
That's fun.
Is there a hangout room somewhere?
Every room's a hangout room, really. You know, we do you want to choose a different location just to hang out for a bit? So I've got the Martian surface, or in a museum under the ocean, can go onto the
Under the
moon.
Well,
ocean.
I don't mind just unmuting everyone here. We can just, I mean,
Yeah.
we're here already. Might as well
Yeah.
just.
Yeah.
That's totally
Just a
fine.
Okay, we'll go there. Unmute all. And I guess we've got full noise.
Oh God.
All right. Wow. So
Guess it's not here for things.
Okay, I'm going to try and look out for who's the noisy ones.
okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to walk around. Teleport.
Yeah. Mingle.
And
Well, I just wanted to tell people thank you, first of all, for having me here. And I also am part of the WISE Leadership Group. I co-founded an organization in Switzerland where we're working right now on some of the UN initiatives. So if people, part of this, I think, is inviting leaders to the table and having leadership dialogue about VR. So I also invite people to jump in on those projects if they're interested in exploring leadership. Thank you.
Yes, and please head over to vrfocus.com if you want to find out more information. We're updating the diversity initiative website, but if there's any way you guys want to be part of it or support it or maybe help out the participants in some way, shape, or form, please contact me on Twitter at NinaVRFocus, and I'm happy to follow the conversation from there.
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, I think that Twitter feeds are behind us on that side. So yeah, same.
Thanks to Dinah and to Chris and to Nina. You can reach me at CaitlinKrause@gmail.com or at MindWiseCK on Twitter. And I just see so many friends in the room that I just want to thank everybody for making time to be here. It's awesome.
Okay, I'm going to briefly unmute everyone. Massive thank you and a big round of applause, obviously, for our absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, great work.
We'll be able to organise so you can get afterwards, and everyone can go and meet up on separate rooms. Obviously, as much as the conference is carrying on, okay, you can all jump onto different rooms at other points. Okay, so we'll close the room down now and prepare for our next session.
That was great.